What's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Darium's Competitive Pokemon. Today's card of the day is Alolan Muk GX. This is a new GX card from Sun and Moon Burning Shadow set. Got the nice full art on display here for you all to see. Going to talk a little bit about the viability of Alolan Muk GX, the attacks on this card, talk about its stats a little bit, and what its future looks like in the competitive Pokemon scene. So let's get started. First of all, Alolan Muk GX is a Stage 1 Pokemon. Alolan Muk does evolve from Alolan Grimer, and there are a couple Alolan Grimers to choose from. I think that the best Alolan Grimer is the one that has that free attack that allows you to search for another Alolan Grimer. I think that's pretty cool, consistent little basic that it has available to it. But the real card we're talking about here is Alolan Muk GX. So it does have a nice little Grimer to evolve from, but Alolan Muk GX is a dark type Pokemon, has 220 hit points, which is huge for a Stage 1 GX. This is actually the biggest Stage 1 Pokemon GX we have seen so far. So props to you, Muk, for being a big boy with 220 hit points. Alolan Muk GX has 3 attacks, and let's take a look. First one's called Chemical Breath. This attack does 70 more damage for each special condition affecting your opponent's active Pokemon. So Chemical Breath does 10 plus 70 more for those special conditions. Takes a dark and 2 colorless energy. So likely, you might be powering this card up with darkness energy and double colorless energy. First of all, this attack does take 2 energy attachments in standard format. And expanded, you could use Dark Patch to power this card up. But in standard, you could max elixir to your Grimer, but that seems probably not something that we're going to be doing in an Alolan Muk deck. So gonna take at least 2 energy attachments for that Chemical Breath attack. And then you think about special conditions. So what are some ways we can inflict special conditions on the opponent? Immediately there's that Hypno that comes to mind. There's a Hypno that can put Pokemon to sleep. So you could maybe inflict sleep on your opponent's Pokemon, and maybe you could play Alolan Muk with Zoroark to help it get around. It's really huge for retreat costs. Zoroark is also a dark type Pokemon that uses double colorless energy, so they kind of have that synergy together. But by the time you're talking about an Alolan Muk GX deck with Zoroark and a Hypno in it, it's just very clunky, and you're not really getting a lot of payout, for the amount of energy that you're investing into this thing. Of course, if your opponent's Pokemon has 4 special conditions on them, right, then you're doing like 290 damage. If they're asleep, burned, confused, poison, if they're paralyzed too, they can have 5 special conditions on them, then that's a lot of damage. But the difficulty, it's very difficult to get this amount of special conditions on your opponent. And I don't really like Chemical Breath as an attack, because the point is, if you're trying to load your opponent's Pokemon up with special conditions, then you have to invest a lot of kind of deck space and effort in order to be able to do that. Maybe you play the new Raichu from Burning Shadows, right, which paralyzes your opponent's Pokemon, but then you're not really getting a huge payout for all this investment. You play maybe a Hypno, maybe you play a Raichu, and at the end of the day, with 2 special conditions, which is probably as many as you could really hope to get on your opponent's active Pokemon reasonably, with a deck built in standard format. Of course, there was that Ariados which poisoned both Pokemon, but that was in Ancient Origins, and that Ariados just rotated. There is Hypnotoxic Laser, which could be used in expanded format, and you have to flip ahead, so on Hypnotoxic Laser, and maybe then you get 2. But say you get 2 special conditions on your opponent's active Pokemon, and that's pretty generous, because that takes a lot of deck work to be able to get that to happen. Then you're doing 150 damage. Maybe you put a choice band. You could do 180 damage if your opponent's Pokemon has 2 special conditions on it, but I just don't think that this is the most efficient way to do 180 damage. If we compare it directly to a Pokemon like Drampa GX, right? Drampa GX's Berserk attack could do 180 damage with a choice band for much less setup. I mean, you could play an evolved Pokemon on the bench and maybe use Po-Town to damage your bench Pokemon to set up Berserk, or you could use Rainbow Energy to put a damage counter on one of your bench Pokemon and power up Drampa's Berserk. Chemical Breath just seems like a very complicated way to do not a whole lot of damage. Chemical Breath does seem to jive with Alolan Muk's GX attack, which I will talk about here momentarily, but I don't really love Chemical Breath as an attack to build an entire deck around. So let's look on to Alolan Muk GX's Crunch attack. Alolan GX's Crunch says discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon, and it costs 4, 2 dark and 2 colorless. This is a very expensive attack to pay for. It's going to be very hard to get 4 energy on your Alolan Muk GX. Now, like I said, there's no real way to accelerate darkness energy to your Alolan Muk in standard format. So this is going to take 3 energy attachments minimum. And by the time you've put 3 energy attachments on your Muk, you know, your opponent has probably targeted this thing down or found some way to damage it with their own Guzma, right? To pull it up off the bench and start to swing into it. Now, Crunch does discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon, but for an attack that costs 4 energy, I would really be hoping to do more than that. I would hope that maybe I could knock the opponent's Pokemon out in 1 hit if I'm investing this much energy into my Pokemon GX. But really, I don't really want to be doing some sort of 2-shot, you know, when I put that much energy on my Alolan Muk. If you're spending that many turns attaching energy, you better be one-shotting your opponent's Pokemon, and Crunch just doesn't get there for me. Last, Alolan Muk GX does have this Tri-Hazard GX attack, which is super cool because it is free. So this is awesome, right? Alolan Muk GX has a lot of expensive attacks, but at least its Tri-Hazard GX is cheap. It is free. And it says, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. This new active Pokemon is now burned, paralyzed, and poisoned, right? So this is pretty cool. And it automatically inflicts 3 special conditions on your opponent's Pokemon. Now, if they can't get this Pokemon out of the active, I mean, after all, they are paralyzed, right? So if they have to pass with their opponent's Pokemon in the active, obviously the paralysis will fade, right, after 1 turn, but they will still be burned and paralyzed. So then maybe you could follow up with the Chemical Breath on the following turn for 150 damage. At the end of the day, I think this is just kind of a gimmicky card, and it's not super competitive, especially since every competitive deck in the upcoming standard format is going to be playing probably 3 copies of Guzma, right? So if you do use Tri-Hazard GX to bring up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and inflict it with all these special conditions, your opponent can just use Guzma to get out of the active. And at the end of the day, your GX attack is not actually inflicting that much damage to your opponent. If they only suffer that poison damage, that's just 10 damage. Maybe they get hit by burn too and get a little more damage, but at the end of the day, it's not that much damage for a GX attack when you compare it to other Pokemon's GX attacks, which just seem much, much stronger. Looking down at the bottom of this card, Muk does have a weakness to fighting ×2, which means that it is weak to Marshadow. Marshadow might not be seen that much in decks though, so fighting weakness, not all that bad of a weakness to have right now. Has a resistance to Psychic, which is pretty nifty for Garbodor decks, but other than that, you know, I mean, maybe you're resistant to Espeon as well, but that's about it. Its retreat cost is 4, like I said, very substantial, but maybe you play Alolan Muk GX with some sort of Zoroark or something like that in order to help get your Alolan Muks out of the active. You can also play Alolan Muk with Guzma, and Guzma can help switch your Alolan Muk out of the active as well while bringing up an opponent's Pokemon on their bench. So Guzma can help Alolan Muk get around that nasty 4 retreat cost and have some mobility in the deck. So at the end of the day, that's Alolan Muk GX. Not super stoked on the card. You know, I don't think I'll be playing it in any competitive decks heading forward into the standard format, but it is a pretty cool collector piece. I do love the art on this thing, and I think Alolan Muk GX is just such a cool card all in all. So thank you all for checking out my Alolan Muk GX card of the day video. Let me know what you all think of Alolan Muk GX in the comments below. Like and subscribe to the video. Thank you all for checking it out. Peace.